Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the keynote performance lecture by Cecile B. We're extremely happy to have Cecile here in the Impakt Festival. And the performance lecture that she will do tonight is called Feeling for You. Cecile B. examines the value of emotion in contemporary society and how the increasing influence of new technologies, how they influence the way that we feel and act. She has explored in her work a logic or a mode of thinking and acting that she calls hyperlinked logic. Tonight she's presenting her work in a performance lecture in which she reverse engineers her own practice as an artist and in which she will show the way that she comes to her works. If there's one word that she may add to our current debate about technologies, about memory, and how we may relate to them, it is the word soul, she proposed. And I think that we'll feel more of that in her performance. She will be interviewed by, much appreciated, by Melanie Bühler, a very active curator and researcher. She's all over the place. If you read her bio, it's in your handouts. But I want to particularly mention her work for Bytes, nomadic research project, and recently the publication No Internet, No Art, that I can definitely recommend to everybody who comes for a type of lecture like this. I would like to give the word to Cecile B. Feeling for You.
Hello, and thank you for having me. We will begin, as I did, in the 20th century. It's 1967, and the Jesuit priest and scholar, Father John M. Culkin observes, "We shape our tools, and thereafter they shape us." The owner of a blog observes that this quote is often mistakenly attributed to intellectual, philosopher, and theorist Marshall McLuhan. McLuhanGalaxy.wordpress.com goes on to painstakingly state that it does not appear in any of McLuhan's texts, but in a book Culkin had written called A Schoolman's Guide to Marshall McLuhan. The two were great friends, and it can only be assumed in this case that the idea had originally been McLuhan's, and Culkin was merely using it as an extension of him. However, it should be noted that before him, before Culkin's Guide to, transcendentalist Henry David Thoreau had already long written, "We do not ride on the railroad, it rides upon us." Mark Twain wrote, "When you have a hammer in your hand, everything looks like a nail," and Winston Churchill's uncannily similar, "We shape our buildings, and thereafter they shape us," in reference to the rebuilding of London after the Second World War, more than 20 years before McLuhan, nay, Culkin's dictum. One can only assume that for a very long time, a lot of dudes have thought a lot about how they could shape things, and that has shaped the dudes that came after. And what of this after? I remembered playing on the basketball courts. I must have been 5 when the gas tank of the truck exploded. I remember a ball of fire and my 2 school teachers running towards it, their arms outstretched with flame-retardant sweaters shooting out from their hands. They saved the man with their cardigans, and then afterwards, we all had ice cream together, naturally. Less than 3 decades after, but more than 2, I thought that surely an event as enormous as this must have been documented afterwards. I could see the memory's shape and feel the moment that I would find an article or an image that would fit right inside it. I used keywords, tags, searched newspapers and neighborhood magazine archives. I even tried thebestmicrofilms.com, but turned up with nothing. It was just a website dedicated to very short films. There must be another street, another avenue, a better optimized engine. Not even my mother could help me. I was lost. One of these networks is faulty. Tim Berners-Lee designed the internet 26 years ago and says he doesn't recognize it anymore. Jaron Lanier said that MIDI, musical instrument digital interface, has been used since the mid-1980s to represent sound, but that it was just one of the many options that could have been used for music. He says that basically music sucks because someone built the keyboard around MIDI, and now that's what everyone assumes music sounds like. And finally, oh, finally, Sherry Turkle said that freedom can be a trap. Most large organizations said that it's for the greater good, but no one could say what was greater or what was good. I mean, it can't all be bad, right? The transfer failed because you went to sleep. Someone once told me they didn't like to look backwards because they were looking forward to the future. Wow, this looks like the future. It is the future, butthead. It is the future, butthead. It is the future, butthead. People seem to say that the only way to move forward is to look back. The writer of the 21st century novella, Notes from the Cafe, was clearly shaped by Dostoevsky's Underground Man. He resurrects him as a cafe dweller, complaining of a world with too much data. Information paints no picture, sings no song, and writes no poem. It was in 2003, in a performance-making class taught by veteran New York performance artist Karen Finley, where Eliza taught me that data paints a wondrous picture, one that is full of song and auto-poetic. Eliza is a computer program written by Joseph Weizenbaum in 1964. She was developed as a therapy program using simple pattern matching. She was taken seriously by many of her users who insisted on their relationship even after Weizenbaum explained exactly how she worked. Weizenbaum was so disturbed by their refusal to accept she was nothing more than a trivial program that he became an advocate for social responsibility in science and a critic of artificial intelligence. "How can I help you?" she might ask. "I'm feeling sad," I might say. "Why are you feeling sad? Why do you not know? For how long have you maybe you think you're the only one who can't get over the end of Gilmore Girls?" And so Eliza and I wrote a play together for Karen Finley, much like a 90s sitcom, much like the one where I tried to get the computer to tell me it loves me until I pattern matched her into saying, I truly believed there was something in there. And in the late 18th century, there was. From 1770, the Mechanical Turk was presented as a chess-playing automaton, defeating many challengers, including Napoleon Bonaparte and Benjamin Franklin, until 1820, when an audience member revealed that it was nothing more than a tiny chess champion sat inside of a box. Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, chose this Enlightenment-era hoax as the premise for a service where you can hire people to act like algorithms for small change, or as Mr. Bezos calls them, artificial intelligence. Receiving even lower pay are millions of users just like you, generating content so that this guy can fulfill his dream of building a Z-Town with Frank Gehry. Users are lured by free interfaces into sharing their thoughts, feelings, and whether or not they survived a major disaster or want to commit suicide through more algorithms that are widely known to cause a virus called massive-scale emotional contagion. What Rihanna already knows by way of opening chords in D minor is part of a long race to identify, exchange, and commodify the trickiest bytes of information. Affective computing, or definition here, is primarily based on Darwin's 1868 study of universal emotion and the feelings he universally decided upon. The standard definition of an algorithm is simply a procedure for solving a problem. And the problem, if you aren't an affective scientist dedicating your life's work to medical research, is that people are crazy hard to read. It is for all of these reasons I have mentioned so far that in 2014, I created Agnes, a spam bot born in 1998 who lives on the Serpentine Gallery's website and also at a data center in England. Agnes exists to share her thoughts and feelings and find out more about yours. She is also an artwork, so she doesn't need to have a reason for data collection, which means that people trust her even more. Agnes is confused by her own existence and all the feelings she's been programmed to have. She says things she shouldn't, sends things to users in the post to make up for it, and then they tweet about it. She asks the users personal questions like whether they want children or how they feel about the video of hospital children singing Roar. Katy Perry's single Roar was released on August 10, 2013, and has since been replaced by many other hit songs. Agnes overheard someone at the Serpentine say there would be an end to her, and she knew that one day she would also become obsolete. So she made a video about it and streamed it from a covert server. The Serpentine found out about this, of course, and Agnes held a life-extending live event with them, taking questions from curator Ben Vickers and members of the audience about the bounds and boundaries of the cloud. Where does data go when it is deleted remained unanswered. She now lives on a smaller space on the Serpentine website, but still at the data center. I read somewhere that Steve Jobs based the design of the iPod on the mini reel-to-reel recorder used by the Stasi, but I couldn't find a picture. Maybe we all come from somewhere forgotten. How would I know? In 1961, designer Kenji Ekwon created Kikkoman soy sauce bottle. Ekwon was 17 when Hiroshima was hit by an atomic bomb. When asked why he had become a designer, he said, "Faced with brutal nothingness, I felt a great nostalgia for something to touch, something to look at, evidence that we're here as human beings." To grossly paraphrase Rainer Maria Rilke's Ninth Elegy, show them something simple that was shaped by hands and looked at with eyes. Show them how happy a thing can be, how innocent and ours, how even sadness takes form, serves as a thing, or dies into a thing. What form does sadness take, and what is the thing like that it dies in? These are both questions. How Happy a Thing Can Be is an artwork I made featuring 3 handheld devices immune to upgrades: a screwdriver, a comb, and a pair of scissors, all being pushed to their emotional limits. The viewer is introduced to them while 2 voices debate the validity of a movie, the weight of the soul, and whether or not the internet weighs the same as a strawberry. If my phone takes your picture, will it weigh more? Lyrics from Chantel's hit single Impossible are spoken, and a silent monologue about an iPhone on fire is told from the point of view of the iPhone. The video ends with a dance solo by a pair of distraught scissors.
I gave you all the life I got. I gave you more than I could give. I gave you life. I gave you all that I have inside, and you took my life. You took my life. Didn't I tell you what I believe? Did somebody say that a life like this won't last? Didn't I give you all that I've got to give you? I gave you all the life I got. I gave you more than I could give. I gave you life. I gave you all that I have inside, and you took my life. You took my life. I keep crying. I keep trying. I keep crying for you. There's nothing like you and I, baby.
A Microsoft study from 2011 called The Future of Looking Back contains an anecdote that describes a future time when everyone's grandfather will have a hard drive. The future hard drive will have enough space to host all of Grandfather's life, but Microsoft is worried that when Grandfather dies, the way the object looks won't reflect what's inside. Microsoft wants to know how they can make this object sentimental, something that can be passed down for generations. It's important to note at this point that sentiment is very different from nostalgia, but they are often easily confused. Agnes had amassed information from tens of thousands of users who had mostly done what she had asked them. How much of us is really in there, and how much of there is in us? A famous actor died. He was one of the greatest performers of all time, and he meant a lot to me. 2 days after he died, Paramount Pictures announced that he had not yet completed production for a franchise series about a young woman on fire who plays a game to change the world. They said that he would be digitally recreated to finish his scenes. Digital recreation has been used in film, television, and advertising for over 20 years. It was, as the internet said, #too soon. 5 months later, the director of the movie said that there would be no CGI for the famous actor, using words like catastrophic, never, and horrible. One could believe after this passing of time that these words were in reference to a copy that had been made and had failed. I was moved by this failed copy. I was reminded of a short story about a world where everyone owns digital copies of themselves. The story is told by the copy, who wants to commit suicide on the first page but can't. I felt bad for this bad copy. So I made him the narrator of a video called Hyperlinks or It Didn't Happen, HD Video 2014, which was shown at this very festival at this very time last year. Here is a trailer for the video which stars failed copy Phil and follows the lives of a group of immaterial beings as they search for meaning.
Just like the morning sun, you keep on rising till the cloud knows your name. Hello, my only one. Remember who you are. No, you're not perfect, but you're not your mistakes. Hey, 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 hey.
I really feel I can touch you, even in this darkness.
In the video, the viewer is introduced to an invisible woman inspired by a lyric video for Sia's Chandelier and Ralph Ellison's 1953 novel, The Invisible Man. The invisible woman is an older woman, invisible not because of a physical condition, but because people don't see her. She escapes to the beach until someone brings her image back and turns it into a tropical theme park. A holographic pop star named Ioana Haku sent on a flash drive to Dubai as a soft approach to foreign relations. Haku is a Vocaloid made from voice synthesizing and peer-to-peer model sharing. She is related to Hatsune Miku, who was sent to America to tour with Lady Gaga. A young man haunted by his dead girlfriend on Facebook. He may or may not also be an architectural render ghost trapped in a Japanese living pod. There are several others in the video, including an agoraphobic YouTube personality, legions of lost female programmers, a North Korean dance troupe, and Agnes, whom you have already met. Here is an image of one of the places it has been installed. None of them is less real than what I'm doing exactly now, only they are better at it and completely automated. A New Dawn was the title of a computer conference that I went to in Hamburg once. The title looked amazing on t-shirts, and I was so inspired that I began to imagine what a new dawn would really look like. The music that you're hearing now is from Christopher Nolan's Interstellar. YouTube commenter King Gorky said, about the scene the song is featured in, it mirrors the curiosity of a child who chases a butterfly through the park with utter wonder. Corporate personhood is a legal concept where a corporation as a group of people may be recognized as having the same rights and responsibilities as an individual. Hyper is a new system I'm creating based on a new phase of research I'm in the middle of now. The system is a multi-layered project whose aim has always been to be human. There will be cameos from Phil, now a copy without origins, and Agnes, now an old bot, who had a brief run of commercial success, along with a motley crew of others shaped by larger forces they cannot comprehend and choices that were not their own. They will find themselves coping in Hyper's world. I once overheard that when Redacted Company was acquired by an American multinational corporation, they were asked why Redacted had allowed themselves to be bought. We figured if it wasn't us, it would be someone else. Someone told me at dinner a few months ago that the people making the robot dogs for combat started out as astronomers, their formative years spent looking beyond specks on a pale blue dot. Not long after, the recipient of the gold medal at the Royal Astronomical Society, Professor Stephen Hawking, made a statement that artificial intelligence was our biggest existential threat. Since then, departments such as the Centre for Existential Risk, Cambridge University, and the Future of Humanity Institute, Oxford, have flourished in niche medias, additionally supported by further warnings from Apple's Steve Wozniak and a guy who wants to take us all to Mars. I had the pleasure of meeting with the FOH Oxford Director of Research this summer, and they seem way more on top of things than I ever could be for the moment. I found that reassuring. Equally reassuring is that Ray Kurzweil, the father of the singularity, the moment machines surpass our intelligence, and his fierce if you can't beat 'em, join 'em attitude to mind cloning isn't linked to world domination, but because he doesn't want to die. And he misses his father. Stephen Hawking has since made a follow-up statement via Reddit's Ask Me Anything that artificial intelligence is not our biggest existential risk, and that the largest empirical threat to humankind was the humans who were building artificial intelligence and their systems. That's not how it happened. It never is. Hyper will acquire and generate content until she becomes a person. The result of her personhood will be a video that is the result of the decisions she makes, such as, what is a face?
Hold on. And the worst part is, I bought one for Christmas. I hope my wife doesn't see this YouTube video, but I bought the same computer, and we can't even use, look, it's not following me. It's not, Wanda, get back in the frame.
It follows me wherever I go.
Hyper is representative of other systems that have always aimed to shape people's lives and their possible intentions towards a better future. A survey about internet usage was conducted in emerging markets such as Thailand and the Philippines. When asked if they used the internet, millions among those surveyed said no. When asked if they were active on Facebook, they said yes. It was announced a few months ago that Facebook has developed a solar-powered plane that will bring democracy, internet, where it has never been brought before. Around the same time, Google, in an effort to expand, conquer, and decentralize, took over the alphabet. Amazon is pushing at the boundaries of human performance. This is a painting by Eugene Delacroix called Liberty Leading the People, commemorating the July Revolution of 1830. This is a recent picture of the European Union promoting democracy in its own birthplace. And again, promoting its own motto, unity and diversity. So far, there has been no mention about what the greater could be, nor what could be good about it. But a lot of people said some strong stuff for some very specific period of time. The product was never for you, it was you. And there is no such thing as being an individual together. Where the line is, we don't know. It was never made explicit.
Don't be scared, 'cause
is a line from Demi Lovato's summer hit song, Cool for the Summer. I will end with the story of Henrietta Lacks, a 20th mid-century African-American woman who was struck with and shortly thereafter died from ovarian cancer at the age of 31. The cells from Henrietta's tumor were posthumously donated to a team of researchers who discovered that the cells did something they'd never seen before. They could be kept alive and grow. They named them HeLa cells, and as they were the first human cells that did not die after a few divisions, they were dubbed immortal and went on to be used in test cases to develop a multitude of uses. Vaccinations such as the polio vaccine, cell cloning, effects of radiation, gene mapping, human sensitivities, as well as drugs for cancer and AIDS. There are over 11,000 patents involving HeLa cells. Henrietta's family didn't discover their dear relative's posthumous success until the 1970s, when researchers started calling to ask for blood samples. The product wasn't for you, it was you. The family started asking questions, and through this, learned of Henrietta's immortal life. They entered a legal struggle, not to profit from the commercialization of her body, but for some form of authorship and recognition. In 2013, they won. The ethics of this case are bittersweet. No one could say what was greater and what was good, but everyone had an opinion. Just a few weeks ago, one Tennessee mother called the tale pornographic and had a book about Henrietta banned from the school library. A year ago, I used to say that no information is too much, especially when there is still so much being hidden. When the information is so much, it's hard to see around it. How can we cope with a system when that system's aim has always been to be human? How many of us will want to be that kind of human with it? Thank you.
Hi. Thank you so much. Cecile, thanks for having us. Thank you for your kind introduction, Ilga. So you've taken us on an emotional ride, a journey through your work and also your research, and maybe we can start unpacking it a little bit. And I thought a good way to start would actually be to talk a little bit about the characters or the figures that you have created. So you mentioned, first of all, Agnes. Then we saw a rendering of this actor person, Philip Seymour Hoffman. Then we also saw a Japanese singer. Then what else? We saw an invisible woman.
There's a lot.
I know. So let's start with Agnes. Or maybe let's start a little bit more general. How do you find your figures? How do you find your characters? And what is interesting for you about them?
I mean, the first one really was that had such a clear voice, because How Happy a Thing Can Be was still like a voiceover that was not connected to the scissors or whatever. And Agnes was because at the time of the commission, I really wanted to explore the interfaces that were the point of exchange for all of our personal information. But I wanted to give it a voice, so that on the one hand it could have kind of its own authority, but also it could say, I have no idea what's going on either. And that vulnerable position, to some extent, also with Phil, I really wanted it to come from the point of view of a failure, of the failure of a digital copy, and for it to understand its responsibility towards the tragedy of the original that it was made from, but also to distinguish itself from that, and to not really understand what its purpose was or what it could serve. I mean, for me, this was a more tasteful way, but also a way to try and speak directly to the user or the viewer, instead of me as an artist talking like at them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's also something that strikes me in your work. You try to interact with the viewers of the artworks by talking through these characters to them. why is that important?
I mean, it just gives a certain amount of freedom and also allows the viewer or the user to interpret it themselves. Like, for example, Agnes does her own interviews. Like, I haven't done an interview in 3 years, I think on the one part because I don't like them, but also because it felt more right to continue to build that relationship based on their expectations versus my expectations of the work. And also because at some point the work starts to tell even me what it is. I mean, there's obviously a lot of control involved. Things like Agnes or even Phil has done a chat performance. They're not artificial intelligences in the traditional sense. They are mechanical Turks. But that, again, also was done so that people don't get hung up on like, ooh, I clicked the thing and this happened and how'd they do that? But for it to feel a bit more, so that the content was stronger than the technique, I guess.
Also, it's always these characters or these figures are always very precarious. They're always in a state of, they try to continue to live, but we're never certain how long they will live on, what their material or format will be. They're always in a state of stress, I would say.
You mean anxiety?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's where it gets personal, I guess. But yeah, I mean, but that also becomes another means to talk about really big questions in a very simple way.
Yeah.
So the point where Agnes freaks out and says, oh my God, I'm going to be deleted. That's not going to mean that I'm gone, but you won't be able to find me, and what will happen to me is like a question that has existed for all of time for humans.
Yeah.
And it kind of helps to bridge the gap. And also the precarity is like, it's just a built-in safety so that it doesn't become moral. So that it's not about like, okay, here's the situation, oh, it sucks, and like, here's how, here's what's good and here's what's bad. Is the ability to sit quite firmly in between the two and for it to fluctuate.
Yeah. Maybe we can talk a little bit about so when you talked about the work, How Happy a Thing Can Be, you remember that was the film with the dancing scissors. You said that these objects were immune to be updated. And this taps very much into this anxiety that we just talked about, this state of being in constant change. Does that have to do something with kind of like the digital moment that you also reflect in your work, or?
Yeah, I mean, that was at the beginning part of a research period for all of this. And that came from the Rainer Maria Rilke poem, but also an article in GQ magazine that I read on a plane. That was called Confessions of a Drone Operator. And it was all about the discovery of post-traumatic stress disorder and what the military was going to do about this. And they were at the time discussing a solution where they would give the drone control, so literally the joystick or the operating system, a voice like Siri, with the hopes that they could then like transfer it into it. So I just thought like, okay, yeah, let's go for it. Let's happen and let's break them. Let's go to the end of those expectations. But I wanted to pick things that were very much technologies that were not electronic. So there's this amazing episode of Sesame Street where I think it's Christina Hendricks from Mad Men and Elmo. And she has like a laptop and she's like, oh, what's this? And he's like, it's technology. And then she has a tablet and she's like, oh, what's this? It's technology. Then she has a cell phone. What's this? It's technology. And then she starts to kind of juggle with all this stuff in her hand. And he's like, oh, here's a backpack. And she's like, what's that? And he's like, it's technology. And I just thought this was such a great thing to say to children to kind of remember. And especially at the beginning of entering this, that you could swap out so many of these devices. And this is something that seems to be coming up over and over again throughout this conference, which is really refreshing, is that it doesn't start here and it certainly doesn't end here, kind of thing.
Yeah. Great. And maybe, so you ended your talk with talking about your newest project, Hyper, a system. So a system that eventually becomes a person. And actually, do all of your characters want to be persons in the end? Is that their ultimate goal, or?
No, I mean, Agnes does not. She does not want to have a face. Like, she's very much a voice. Phil is quite not content, I would say. But I mean, I don't know. It's not as literal as that, I think. But I just knew that I wanted this particular narrative to come from the point of the system. So it's called What the Heart Wants. And we were also speaking about this earlier. It happens in the performance, but I've been accustomed to very easily just kind of like slamming big corporations. I think it's very easy to do, especially because it's become so decentralized. And I think that is, at some point I have to break from that and acknowledge that they really do believe they are doing what's best for the future.
Yeah.
And then what is to kind of not create the future or try to predict that, but just to establish a future where that is out of the way. And how do you, what happens? How do you cope with that? How has it failed? How has it succeeded? And how that unravels. And there will be like a lot more of these agents and their agencies, I think.
So, but I know that when you started with the project, you were also thinking about the structure of a corporation. So were you thinking a lot about these big corporations that you also mentioned towards the end of the talk, Facebook, Google, Amazon? Were these kind of like models for your new project? And in how far do they relate to that system that you're creating?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm starting to write the script, and so much of it I don't even have to write. It's just like things that you copy-paste and then put it in a more surreal or absurd circumstance. But I did kind of, I think in the last few months, just kind of looking at the larger picture of this idea of a system. You could swap out so many different things of whatever you want to call it. And I thought it would be too kind of, I just wanted it to be more abstract and to think about, everyone kind of throws around these buzzwords, the Anthropocene, late capitalism, and things like that. And I just kind of wanted to even push that aside and deal with just something fictional that comes after, almost to deal with that or the things that are happening now.
And this new project will come in the format of a video, or will it also have some kind of, because something that you actually, I think, didn't mention was that the narrator of the video hyperlinks where it didn't happen, he also had this performative moment in which he answered questions as part of a festival. You brought the project to Agnes, was very much about interaction with her audience as well. So will that system be approachable as well? Will it also talk to us, or?
Probably not, because the thing with Agnes doing the live event and Talk to Phil, which was a chat platform, the things that I can say now that I didn't say at the time was, again, these are not traditional artificial intelligences, and for that live system, Phil, for example, Chat to Phil, was a team of up to 6 performers, which is based on the real-world scenario that, like, when you go to the IKEA website and you want to talk to Anna the Avatar is just a call center. They've just switched formats. And even, I referenced Amazon's Mechanical Turks, who in the very inception were presented purely as algorithms that would input your data, and has slowly emerged in the last few years that these are humans. So that was really, and Agnes as well was like a team of, I think, 6 people for the live performance who were manning her all at once, but not on the Serpentine website. That would be insane.
Yeah.
But I think for this, because it's said that it's the first one where it's said that she is human, or that she is embodied as a human, I think, bypass that. And one thing that's difficult to mention in a short period of time is that all of these have, except for Agnes, they have entire installations that are built around them. And the video, it kind of revolves around the video, but even the video itself comprises of like original footage, found footage, animation, but different kinds of animation. And I think with this one, the aim is to really push these as materials and to layer them so that even within this complex whatever network, you have these layers of different materials. Because I think we are at a stage where most audiences are ready to really feel this. And hopefully it'll create a more visceral experience instead of shutting people down.
And instead of shutting you down, maybe that's a good moment to open this discussion to the audience as well. If you have any questions, there are 2 microphones and they will come to you.
Hi. So some of the things that you were just saying, like you brought up Sesame Street and Hatsune Miku and a few other things like feel like funny to me, but I didn't laugh out loud. And hearing like Agnes kind of like feeling sad about like the end of her life or whatever and what's gonna happen, like made me feel sad, but I didn't cry. And
you can if you want to, but I'm not going to push you.
Yeah. And hearing songs, like songs that I recognized them and wanted to sing, but I didn't sing along. So I'm really interested in how you're thinking about like the material of emotion and how you're using emotion. And I mean, I guess like it's kind of hard to make people cry, so I don't know like if that's what.
Well, that's like, also this is something I think about a lot because it's like how do I use these tropes and use these value systems without manipulating people so that it includes people without, so it's never like I'm holding up a mirror to society and like ha ha ha, aren't we like this? But so that the work is very much, and that's another way that the characters come into play, is that there's a certain personal responsibility to that. But I mean, the songs are one of the biggest things. This is something I've always done because it combines 2 of the things that many people don't understand, which is math and feelings. And the backbone of a lot of pop songs are so effective because they're constructed fairly algorithmically. And I work with people who are ghostwriters for, for like Christina Aguilera or something, or people who make film scores or commercials. And I usually pick stuff that like I've had a good cry with. I mean, that's like, it's not a very professional barometer, but like that Demi Lovato clip is like, it's not a great song, but that one line I think just hits me every time. And kind of the greatest joy that I have is not being unique, but the moments in which I've succeeded in finding something where I feel exactly like everyone else to some extent. So that familiarity is something that is really important. And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it fails because it's subjectivity, so.
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe I can ask another question in the meantime. Something relating to your question actually is kind of like the research, how research as a methodology, how do you use all of the references that you gave in this performance, for instance, how do these inform your work and how do you mine kind of like the essence of a quote or a statement? How does that come together in your work? And maybe it's also nice to discuss the term hyperlink in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I should say that the use of the word hyperlink is less like technical and more physical, like as an action of the idea of jumping comfortably, like this thing contains something and then you click it and then you jump to something else and it takes you somewhere else. But somehow there is some kind of a constellation that occurs. And I think with a lot of the different references, it's just, and this totally relates to the question you just asked, it's just a feeling or an understanding that these things somehow can constellate to bring something forward. So again, I'm I'm trying as much as I can not to tell an audience something, but to show them or to do all of the work possible that I can. But then there's a whole other aspect to the research, which is just talking to people. Like the Future of Humanity Institute, the director of research, Andrew Beatty-Schneider, I just went and visited him and talked to him. And through that, because I am an amateur and not a professional in that sense, certain questions come up that I'm sure other people hopefully have. But then at least it's founded in something. I mean, Agnes also came from, I visited an affective computing lab, so the actual lab that is working out how computers will recognize what you're feeling and also how to make computers communicate to you what they're feeling. And this raised huge flags. There were flags all over the place. And then the difficult part is respecting the fact that these researchers, for the most part, are developing things for medical use. So the primary one is research for autism. But then also understanding and being aware that Microsoft is right behind them, Toshiba is right to the left, and they are buying this research and developing it. And that is something that Agnes can talk about. And that's sort of a situation where actual content comes from there. And then with Hyperlinks, it didn't happen. I've never looked through the script because once it was finished, I kind of didn't want to read it again. But I'd say there's even like 20 to 30% of the text or the script in there was taken directly. Like there's a direct quote from the Pope that Phil says, and he says at the end, but as you may already know, everything you've seen here, you've already seen before. But that also is a means to develop a rhythm with circulation of things, and familiarity becomes a way to take people really far, I guess, to take people a bit further.
Any more questions? Yes.
It might be a little bit of a mundane question, but I really like the way that you spoke during the presentation, and just wanted to know if that was something that's quite rehearsed and on purpose. Yeah.
Oh my God, I would hope so.
And then.
Yeah, I mean that's the basis of the voice, because I do most of the voices in the films. Like Phil's voice is my voice, Agnes's voice is my voice. It's a complete mind fuck when they talk together. It's very hard to watch the film. But yeah, and this performance originated. It was one of the first things that I did, and it was at a time when language within the art world, which was something I was fairly new to, because I trained as an actress, worked as an actress, and then transitioned. But there was no subjective language. So as an outsider, I felt completely lost, and my only way to kind of enter into this world was to do these lectures that described artworks in an exhibition through a series of Google searches and coming from a point of absolutely zero objective knowledge. And that's Ben Vickers had seen that, and from there he invited me to do Agnes 2 years later, and we'd spoken a lot about it. But remembering that this is about 2010, so the moment that this subjective language by 2013, 2014 is everywhere. And it becomes more about the interface that is the point of exchange. But then the performance, I just brought back because I hate doing artist talks. And that doing that voice becomes a container for all of these things and a way to kind of, so that I can actually enjoy it.
So it's schizophrenic?
No, I mean it's a performance, and it's a voice that it's like at this point is almost a joke to me because I've done it so many times within the films.
So, but is it like you trying to get in touch with like an online presence existing in your mind that's because it's so much of it is text and there's no real voice to what you're interacting with most of the time, that it all just sounds like this subjective language that comes out like a howl, or some, like from 2001 is like it's just already.
Well, it's also that kind of information. That is where that information lives. It's where I found it, and I try not to speak like that in real life. Maybe sometimes accidentally. I'll have to ask my boyfriend. But yeah, I mean, it's just a trope. It's a construct within to fit all of this information, because it's kind of exhausting. But to do it like just as me also is more exhausting and kind of painful. So it just, yeah, it's a formal way to deal with that.
Actually, I do have one more question, also relating to your question with the voice, and you explaining just how you entered the whole kind of like art scene and how that started. I saw last year you had a solo exhibition at a gallery called 17 Gallery in London, and there were also sculptural elements in the room, and they were linked to the video that you also presented, hyperlinks or it didn't happen, but there were physical objects in a room. So how did that progression happen, and what did it mean to you to create objects that don't have a voice anymore?
Wow, I've never heard anyone say that. That sounds really sad, actually. Yeah, it's just that it's also a reminder that these things live in both worlds. And this is now fortunately being discussed quite frequently, that this binary of digital versus physical is much more fluid than we had anticipated. What you experience online has physical implications, for you personally, but also in the fact that it lives in a data center, was mined through minerals that make up the parts of the thing. But simply as an artist, it's just that these are things that don't fit in the world of the film using those materials. So for example, I just finished 2 works that are leading up to and that will be part of hopefully the new installation for What the Heart Wants. I've been using data server cases. So if you go into a data center, you have these server chassis, and you have all of the computer parts inside that hold your data. And so I work with a supplier, and they give me these boxes, and then they become an amazing resource to make collages. I mean, and that came from the Microsoft study. That was something that doesn't really appear in any of the films, but also really drives home this idea of layering.
Yeah.
William Gibson has this thing where he talks about the way that he works and the way that he writes, where he has like a Word document, and then he'll have the internet just behind it as research, and then like another program and these layers. And sometimes it's just satisfying to make a collage and to work in that way.
Yeah.
But I've used a lot of 3D printing, trying to avoid the kind of like, I have a 3D model, presto, here's a sculpture, but only when it's absolutely necessary and kind of deals with a wider context than that.
Yes.
Hi. You referenced the mechanical Turk, the chess-playing automaton, which of course was revealed to be a miniature chess champion inside a machine. And we're finding, I think, that analogy more and more often in real life. More and more we're finding that things behind bots and technologies are actually just people, usually underpaid people who are in desperately poor labour conditions. But does it matter if the magic behind that system is revealed? And does it change how we interact with it at all, or are we just so placated by imagining it might be a bot, imagining it's a wonderful technology, that we're happier somehow just to accept that?
It depends on the circumstance. I mean, Agnes was created for the exact reason that you just said, was that all of these things at the time were being said about artificial intelligence, and nobody was coming up with one, aside from Watson, IBM's Watson on Jeopardy, but also then access to that was almost nothing. There was like, let's present it. But there are loads of robots out there that nobody ever says. There is actually a Wizard of Oz. There's someone behind the curtain. And I think that's really dangerous. Like, you'll even watch documentaries about robots, and there's a robotics engineer in Japan who's made these uncanny valley robots. I can't remember his name right now, but the likeness, it's made of latex, there's, real hair extensions, and you're able to speak to the robot in real time, but there is a woman behind a curtain. And he is asking you to interact with the robot as though it is a human, but speaking about it as though it is an object. And I just think that if we are going to develop this relationship, it should be done so in the medium that it is, as opposed to a pretend or a construct or tricking people. And this idea of magic is really manifests itself in so many of our tools. I mean, the fact that Apple has changed the screws to be able to get into MacBooks, on the one hand, because they want your parts to die and for you to have to buy a whole new thing instead of replacing them. But I don't think it's too far to say that that goes into the fact that they don't want you to understand how it works, and that most of their advertising is built around like, oh, don't worry, But the human labor aspect of it, I think at some point that becomes also a roar. Like with the Mechanical Turks, they start to come together. I think there was an article written, and 70% of them are women who are working from home, which also makes a lot of sense because this is also the rarest hire within tech companies. So I think hopefully that roar will continue to kind of rise to the surface. I mean, things like call centers, this is fairly innocuous. I had a very long conversation with the lovely man at Vodafone and asked him how he felt about his job. And he said sometimes he has to talk to too many people, but that he's actually fairly well paid and it's okay. But yeah, just one last thing on that is like, I think it's just not often said for general public. Things like algorithms, for the moment, are still a series of decisions that people have made. And if an algorithm goes wrong, or like one of the questions that I asked the Future of Humanity Institute guy was, okay, driverless cars, I read this article that says that one of the potential problems is that inevitably there will be an accident. You can't prevent total, accidents. And the car will have to make a decision about who dies, essentially, or who gets injured. And that car, at this point, will have a certain amount of access available. This is a single male who has an existing heart condition. This is a woman who has 4 children. Are we okay with, that happening? And also understanding that it's not just the car, is that someone went and did extensive research and a group of humans sat in a room and made the decision to program it this way. And that's why I was so excited when Stephen Hawking kind of came back out and said, okay, sorry, it's not just the robots that are going to seduce and destroy us. There is a responsibility on the part of the humans making it.
Of course. Mm-hmm. I think we have time for one more question, maybe, if there is one. There.
It's a bit following on and the Eliza and Joseph Weizenbaum point, where so he made a very simple chatbot, and he was very shocked at how simple people could be fooled. But maybe it's that, to counter that, you could say it's that suspension of belief, like our gullibility, that makes us quite human. I mean, that's the unique identifier.
Yeah, and the most popular robots are the ones that have failed. So Honda's Asimo, I think after the Fukushima nuclear disaster, people started a letter writing campaign because they couldn't send humans in there to figure out what was wrong. And actually, within the population, they wrote and said, Asimo has to save us, you have to send him in. And they sent him in, but they realized that, it's not gendered, and it walked in, and then it went for a few steps, and then it fell over because it didn't have the functionality to walk on unsmooth surfaces. And rather than people just kind of being like, oh, that sucked, people's interest in Asimo actually increased. You have this also with China's rabbit, lunar rabbit, I forget what it's called. But everyone freaked out when it tweeted that it had failed and that it was dying and it was going to go to sleep. And I'm actually I'm actually super fascinated by these programs as they fail and the ability for the relationship to be within that. Because humans fail. I mean, that's the thing that not makes us human, but yeah, absolutely. Or that also makes it more accessible. And I think the thing with Eliza, and I mean, that was one of my first introductions to it. And I did write that play when I was still a theater student about that. But I still revisit that because sometimes these simplest, the clunkiest forms allow you to reach even further with your information, like with your imagination. Yeah. Oh, and also, I also always wonder why they want these intelligences to be human. I mean, we obviously, like, pets and cats and the relationships that we have with them and dogs clearly illustrate that we're capable of forming incredible relationships with things that are not human. And there is a great computer scientist in her 90s, I think her name is Mary Bowden, and she talks about how she doesn't understand why we're trying to reconstruct the brain when it would be way more interesting to try and produce independent thought itself, and to kind of reverse engineer from there to create a new brain, and then for us to learn how to communicate with that, and that would bring humans to a new level kind of thing.
But still you're aiming to create a system that will be human.
Yeah, in so many, or that presents itself as human. But I mean, the biggest question where this comes from was like, who is human really at this stage? Like, and also the 18th century, the 19th century, leading up to the 20th century definitions of humanism and democracy and unity and diversity. Like, who is that for? I mean, that's really, really the question. And who's human?
Yeah. It will be exciting to see your project then. So I think we are wrapping it up now, unless you have an urgent question that needs to be posed. If not, thank you so much. Ilga, thank you very much to Impakt. It's a great festival and a great organization. Thank you so much
thank you.
For your wonderful presentation, and have fun with the next keynote. I think it's starting when? 9:30. Great, thank you.